Welcome to the Bad Paranormalist. In this video, we'll be talking about the first Loch Ness Monster sighting of 2025 and seeing how it fits in with a recently published paper called Identifying Biases and Relevant Statistical Populations, the Case of the Loch Ness Monster. We'll begin the study a little bit later. It is from some researchers from the University of St. Andrews, but it just lined up perfectly with the first sighting of 2025. So let's check this thing out. And we'll just go right to the article.
A witness observed what appeared to be a large, dark mass beneath the calm, still waters of the loch. The sighting, described as part of the body of Nessie submerged beneath the water, has left us intrigued by the possibility of a new glimpse of the legendary creature.
So this is a classical Loch Ness Monster sighting. Just a dark object breaking the water. Let's go back to the article to get the rest of the story.
The conditions on the day were ideal for spotting unusual activity, with the water surface perfectly calm and still, offering a clear view of the mysterious occurrence. The sighting, which lasted for several minutes, has been reviewed by the Loch Ness Centre and has claimed that it is the first potential sighting that it has been notified of in 2025.
Now, this is where the fun begins. Let's break down this sighting. We have a witness, only one, who observed what appeared to be a large, dark mass beneath the calm, still waters of the loch. And because the water was so calm, it offered a clear view of this mysterious occurrence, which lasted several moments. So there's one witness, took pictures, fantastic. But this is also like information. We don't really know who the person is, and they haven't really identified themselves. We don't know what camera was used to capture these photos. We don't even, like looking at the first photo with the hump, it looks like there's tons of these digital distortions around it. And comparing it to the second photo, I mean, we don't know whether these photos are related at all. I couldn't find the hump in the first photo and the second photo. And we don't know what camera it was taken on. We don't know whether it was a phone, whether it was some sort of recording. There's no GPS data. There's no digital data. I'm assuming this was taken on a cell phone, but there's no digital data that goes with these photos. There's no way we can verify that it is where they say it was at that time. And here on the Great Prairies, when we say a lake or a body of water is still, it's crystal clear still. This looks very rough, not clear at all. But maybe that's common and clear for the loch. I don't know personally. But there's no way we can verify the date or time or where this was taken. I mean, I'm sure people could look at the loch and be like, oh yeah, this picture was taken there. And nowadays, anything that we look at, we need to consider whether this was reproduced with AI. But when I put on my black foil hat, it doesn't even say that these photos are associated with the sighting. They just have these photos with this sighting. Now what we have here is a second-hand story of a large dark mass beneath the calm waters of the Loch Ness, which lasted several minutes, which is pretty cool. And there's some photos, but we don't know whether these photos are a part of it. Now let's head to the paper, Identifying Biases and the Relevant Statistical Population, the Case of the Loch Ness Monster. The authors by Charles Paxton, Andrea Shine, and Valentine Popov. Let's head right down to the abstract. Sorry folks, this paper I fell in love with. We'll get through it and then we'll compare the data and the first Loch Ness sighting of 2025. It only gets better from here, trust me.
We used a database of Loch Ness Monster reports to show university-level students how important it is to think about bias and the identification of the correct statistical population.
The main purpose of this paper was not to find Loch Ness, but to challenge the students of this university-level class and make them think about the quality of the data they use for their statistics and how you could use anecdotal evidence. This next part sums it up perfectly.
Whilst the data is inappropriate for directly making inferences about Loch Ness monsters, it may be appropriate for making inferences about the population of Loch Ness Monster reports.
So this paper doesn't really have anything to do with the Loch Ness Monster. It's more about the data about the sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. It's brilliant.
An important, but often overlooked step in any statistical analysis is the recognition of the appropriate statistical population under consideration. In our experience, students, and many scientists, can be quite sloppy in identification of the correct statistical population.
Garbage in, garbage out. In the world of science, if your data isn't true, then all your conclusions are false. You can't reach any true insight from false data. You need to make sure that you have collected the right data and asked the right questions. Back to the paper, this powerful paper.
Anecdotes, here taken to be the narrative of a detached incident, or of a single event, told as being in itself interesting or striking, anonymous, 1989, are generally not regarded as amenable to scientific and by extension statistical scrutiny.
In the world of the paranormal, there is only anecdotal information and events. It's so hard to pinpoint what is actually happening, even when you have equipment for detecting and highly trained individuals. It makes it extremely hard to have any scientific verification of any sort of events that happen. But ghost stories are fun. People do see strange shadows in the woods, and flying airships live in the sky. It's just, the supernatural is so much fun. It's storytelling, it's folk tales. Back to the paper.
The statistical population under consideration here is not Loch Ness monsters, but Loch Ness Monster recorded and collected reports. We do not know if there is a population of Loch Ness monsters, but we do know that there is a population of Loch Ness Monster reports.
And this is where the cleverness of this paper comes from. They look at the data sets, and they know they're not here to prove the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. But just let's look at the data and analyze it and see what we can extrapolate from the data of the sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. Now, the data started in 1934. They also took sightings for the Loch Ness Phenomenon Investigation Bureau, the Loch Ness Center, as well as personal interviews, newspapers, books, and magazines. And when that was all done, they ended up with 1,800 reports. Sightings that they excluded were hoaxes, makes sense. Photos that were found to have Loch Ness monsters lurking in the background, but not the intended target of the picture. Anomalous sonar results. And reports that just consist of strange noises or smells, or where a wake or a disturbance was seen but no solid object broke to the surface or was seen under the water. And to me, these seem like they should have been considered. Reports of noises and smells when they're in houses are considered poltergeist events. When they're in the woods, it's Bigfoot. They're sort of synonymous all around the world, and they're just attributed to whatever monster lives in that area. Let's move on.
The data processing was also done with utmost care. For example, in the spreadsheet where we compiled the data, we entered only the information given by the witness rather than inferred by the reader.
So only the best anecdotal data was used. Let's head on down to this section where they're having this debate with the students and about this project. And it's just summed up so nicely.
The students gradually realize that whatever inference can be made, it cannot be about LNMs, as these cannot be sampled. Our sampled population is clearly LNM reports, but even that is not the whole story. The population is actually LNM reports after the chain of events described in the introduction, which involve the witness, the data collector, and the analyst.
It's nice to see this type of discussion happening. No, this isn't a report about the best time to see the Loch Ness Monster. It's a collection of data and events that lead up to a Loch Ness Monster sighting. What an eye-opening point in this discussion. I loved it. These students have a higher standard than most of these whistleblowers out there. But in the end, there's only 1,433 encounters, starting back from 1850, 641 were first-hand reports.
There are many suggested explanations for the Loch Ness Monster, Paxton and Shine, 2016. One suggested explanation for some Loch Ness Monster reports is that undulating hump-type monsters are caused by wake effects, Baker and Westwood, 1962, Gould, 1934, where the source of the wake cannot be seen by shore observers close to the water level, Shine, PRSOBS. Such wakes can really only be seen at lower Beaufort wind force scale.
So when you get right down to it, the Loch Ness Monster is just a hump and a wake when you break everything down. So that's good to know. This is what we're looking for. Some of the real insights from this data set is that sightings last around 4.5 minutes, which contradicts the idea that these are only glimpses of these creatures. Another interesting find is that the amount of duration of the sightings has been reduced by 10 minutes since the 1930s, so even the Loch Ness Monster is having a shorter attention span. And this next part might seem shocking to you, but the second-hand reports were way more outrageous than the first-hand witnesses. People have a flair for storytelling, they get a hold of the truth, and they want to spice it up a little bit. That's why they're telling people. And these things, these sightings of strange events don't happen all the time. They don't have any sort of predictable time schedules that they use. And it's so well addressed in this next paragraph.
Scientific skeptical texts, e.g. Shermer, 2003, often suggest that scientific inferences cannot be made from anecdotes because anecdotes are vague, unsystematic, and unrepresentative, as indeed they are. Yet many low-frequency, albeit important, natural phenomena such as meteorites, Burke, 1986, transient atmospheric luminous events, Boak et al. 1998, Franz et al. 1990, and rogue waves, Draper, 1964, have been initially reported only as anecdotes. Therefore, it is worth getting students to consider what inferences can be made from such data, as it brings up questions of bias, appropriate statistical populations, and appropriate sampling units, which are fundamental to any statistical analysis.
And that's perfect. Meteorites don't strike the Earth all the time, but when they do, they can be seen briefly and then they're gone. And there might not be any evidence that the event happened, but it did happen. That's why we need these anecdotes to hold on to what we see until you can verify it scientifically. And now, we're going to completely ignore the lessons that the students learned from this paper, and we're going to compare the first sighting of the Loch Ness Monster 2025 to the data in this report and see if things sync up. So we're going to get right into chart 1 here. March is, it's not the most popular month, but it's by far, there are things happening there. We don't know what time of day, so we'll skip that. And it would have been a 1 or 2 on this wind force scale, so pretty normal for a Loch Ness Monster sighting. This information was second-hand, and there was a photo and no distance was given, so nothing really, there's no new insight here. Chart 3, again, no info was given on the beast size. Chart 4, the length of time of the hump. So several minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, so pretty on average, especially for 2025. The Loch Ness Monster has things to do. So overall, this sighting is really below average. And it's just a hump in the water with a wake and a picture. And this is the curse of man, to see something so extraordinary like a hump in the water and now be burdened with this quest to find out what the reality of this event is. Whether it's the glimpse of a monster deep within the loch, or a strange encounter with odd folks in the woods. The same curiosity that drives men to find the proof of these encounters, these events, comes from the same place and curiosity of what pushes us to go see what's on the dark side of the moon and beyond.